Recording in progress.
Madam President, Commissioners, good morning. It's 11:30.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Director Wong. And we'll go ahead and get started with our pre-commission agenda. And are we going to go ahead and start with Sherry, or are we going to go ahead through our...
No, let's
start.
No, you go ahead with...
go ahead with what we usually do. Okay. Welcome, everybody, commissioners. We'll start with the general housekeeping items. If there's anything of concern or questions that anybody would like to bring up before we discuss the agenda. Commissioner McKinney.
Yes, Madam President, I'm wondering if as a commission we can discuss these barriers that we've got in place because of the COVID pandemic. I, for one, would like to get rid of them. If the rest of the commission is in agreement, I would say we could.
All right.
Decide on that.
And we did broach this topic last week, but we wanted to make sure that everybody is in agreement to do that. So does anybody have any objection to removing these barriers?
No, I'm happy with I'd rather just get rid of the whole thing.
Commissioner Goldberg?
I already made my concerns known.
And Commissioner Pickering?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, thank you.
No objection.
All right.
So we can move forward with having those taken away. All right. Any comments or concerns, questions about the agenda? All right. Hearing none. Director Wong.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you. Commissioners, again, good morning. I had just a few things, and I'd like to introduce Sherry, who will be sharing with you a very important topic that we're going to be going through here in the very, very near future. First off, as a reminder, we have the Boise joint session tomorrow at 1 p.m. You have the agendas in front of you for that. On Thursday, via Zoom, on Friday via Zoom, we're having the BAC, PAG, and the ADA joint meeting via Zoom, and so starting at 11:30, going to 12:30. The Boise Chamber Leadership Conference is Sunday through Tuesday. Commissioners McKinney, Hanson, and May, you have the draft agendas in front of you and such. And as a reminder, all of the arrangements have been made and such. Stacy will brief you on what's covered and what's not covered. So again, if you your room, board, all that good stuff's covered. Any type of travel expenses you have, we will reimburse those for you. Again, however, if you elect to go out and party hardy, you're going solo and you're paying for the whole thing. And such.
Thank you.
On Thursday, between 4 and 6, our staff will be at the Molinare Park, Maple Grove, to talk about the corridor plan project that's going on. People have been invited to walk, bike, or roll into the area and meet our staff and ask any questions that they may have. And then finally, just talking a couple things about money. Registration fees, year to date so far, about 200,000 behind what they were at this point last year. Could be due to the 2-year licensing criteria, all this different thing, or that people can't get cars right now based on the supply chain issues. And just, project costs and such based on inflation and all the other issues we're all dealing with is about 1.5 million above planned operations. Nothing to panic about, but just something that I want to make sure that you all knew as we go into that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sherry Canals, our Deputy Director of Human Resources. And this is going to be a continued series of things we're going to be talking to you as you go through your budget process. Every year, well, I should say it that way. I mean, now and then we do a salary survey, which specifically targets different job groups in the district to see if we are competitive across the board. We're going to be doing something a little different this time around, again, based on the interesting economic challenges we have. So, Sherry, she has some very great information for you.
You're welcome, Sherry.
Thank you. President May, Commissioners, Sherry Canals, Deputy Director of Human Resources. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk with you today. Get this turned on. As the director mentioned, we want to talk a little bit about our salary survey strategy. This is an informational briefing, and we'll just kind of kick it off by talking, first of all, just a little bit about our compensation background. You know, obviously the purpose of a compensation program is to attract great employees, to retain great employees, but also to keep them motivated and engaged while they're here. When you look at our compensation structure, we have a combination of a traditional and a market-based structure. We typically, on our hourly employees, we have a typical pay graded structure. And as many public agencies do, we have step moves within that hourly, within that pay grade structure. On the salaried side, we have a pay band program or a job band program, which again has gained much more popularity in many different sectors. And then in terms of the way we look at compensation, typically we've always looked at other public sector employers, and it has been discussed with you previously and we'll talk more about today. There is really a need for us to also look at private sector wages when we're looking at compensation. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. When we look at compensation, I mean, the salary survey will focus on salaries and it will focus on benefits. But when we talk about total compensation, we're talking about pay, we're talking about benefits, but we're also talking about culture. And, you know, the pay and the benefits may attract someone to the district, but the culture is something that we hope will keep them. Culture is one of those items that's kind of intangible. It's difficult to put a dollar value on it. And it's different for every individual. We've also found it can be a little bit generational in our workforce. When you look at our workforce, our average age is about 45. But when you dig down into that a little bit deeper, we have team members as young as 19 and as on the other end of the spectrum, as old as age 70. But when you think about that, what may be important for someone in a culture or in a benefit program for someone in their 20s may be very different than what someone in their 50s or 60s may be looking for. So when we look at that culture aspect, when we look at that benefits aspect, we're looking for something very broad that can hopefully touch on something that will be important to everyone in our workplace. Total rewards opportunities. This kind of feeds into the idea of total compensation. Again, we're looking at pay, we're looking at benefits, we're looking at career and professional development. When we focus on pay, there's a few things to kind of consider outside of people promoting into different positions. So when someone has been hired, they have multiple opportunities to increase their pay. The first being the annual COLA that, as you know, is approved by the commission each year. The COLA is something that is typically given across the board to all employees. Obviously, they have to meet certain service requirements, but it is an across-the-board increase. With one exception, they do need to be meeting performance expectations. As a public employer, we feel that that is our accountability to the public to make sure that as people move through the pay ranges, that they are performing the mission of the district. So they do need to meet performance expectations. But outside of that, the COLA is across the board. Another opportunity that people have for increases in pay is a performance-based adjustment. And what this is, it is given at the same time that COLA is given, and it is for the top 10% of performers in each division. It's not a 10% increase, it's 10% of the people of the top performers. So for example, district-wide, we're looking on average of anywhere from 40 to 45 people a year may be eligible for this performance-based adjustment. This is a great opportunity to recognize and reward those people that are often behind the scenes. They may not be the people that you see in front of you each week, but they are the people that are fulfilling our mission behind the scenes. They will receive a performance evaluation every August. The results of that performance evaluation, then the supervisors can then make those recommendations that go up from the supervisor to the manager, to the deputy, and ultimately to the director for final approval for those performance-based increases. Another way that people can earn a one-time type of award is a Sustained Superior Performance Award. Oftentimes people may be working on a special project that may take over a considerable amount of time. It may require them to go far above and beyond what maybe they would normally be required to do. So an SSP award, as we call them, is an opportunity to earn recognition for those efforts. Another opportunity may be if someone is out on a medical leave and the people that are still working may have to pick up those additional duties while someone is out on the medical leave. So the Sustained Superior Performance Award is again another opportunity for recognizing people for going above and beyond. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah. Is there a percentage applied to the Sustained Performance Awards like there is to the performance-based adjustments?
So that
1% to, or whatever.
Sorry, Commissioner Ray, Commissioner Hanson, that is typically a lump sum amount. So it's a flat dollar amount. So it may be a $200 award or a $300 award.
No, well, I guess my question is the number of people who would qualify for sustained performance. Is there a cap, or can anybody qualify for that, or is it within that pool of the 10% and it's 1% of
No,
those?
anyone can qualify for that based on their work. You know, and it really is dependent upon the situation. As I mentioned, it could be a project. It could also be an emergency response issue. If we've had an extreme emergency that was kind of an all hands on deck, there may be some opportunities within that. So, do that. The other area is for our hourly employees. As I mentioned, in the hourly structure, there are also step moves. So with each pay grade, there is a step move at the 6-month mark, at the 2-year mark, and at the 5-year mark. And this allows an opportunity for our hourly team members to move through the pay range if the annual COLA increase is not continuing to help them to move through the pay range and they're meeting expectations. These step moves will continue to help them progress through the pay range. That is not an option in our salaried pay scale. So that is something that is only for the hourly team. Moving on the total rewards piece, benefits, obviously we've had great opportunities in the past year to enhance our benefits program. And also career and professional development is also very important to our team members. When people come on board, they're oftentimes looking for a way to improve. Maybe they want to move into a new career field. Maybe they want to improve their skill sets in the career field that they're in. And that's where the career and professional development comes in. And it really is important at all areas of the organization. You have been so supportive in our Roadmaster and our Road Scholar program. And that's a training program that focuses on our general equipment operators and many of our maintenance and traffic operations team members. Those training opportunities were not there prior to that program. And they now have those opportunities to grow not only within their knowledge of construction, but leadership and other areas that would be beneficial to them. On the flip side of that, we have engineers that often have to maintain continuing education credits to be able to maintain their licensing. So it's very important to have a program that will support them in that effort to ensure that they can maintain those licenses. Leadership is another aspect of that. As people want to grow and move into leadership, we have Leadership ACHD or Leadership Boise, Leadership Meridian, our courses at Boise State University. Again, all opportunities for people to grow in that aspect. I do want to hand out at this point, let me step away for just a moment. Stacy's handing out to you a total compensation statement. And I wanted just to have an opportunity for you to kind of see it from another perspective. This is a statement that we periodically give out to our team members to kind of show them that their total compensation is more than just what they take home in their paycheck. There is kind of what we've often referred to as the hidden paycheck in the amount of benefits that the district pays for on their behalf. And the total compensation statement just gives an opportunity to kind of outline so that they understand the full value of the benefits that they're often receiving. On this total compensation statement, it again is just an example, but we have an individual that had basically 8 years of service, making an hourly wage of just over $28 an hour. When you look at their gross salary, they're making just over $59,000 a year. But when you add in the value of the benefits that the district is paying on their behalf, that becomes a much larger number. This is an example of someone that may have selected family coverage for their medical and for their dental. So if you go down the left side of the column there, you'll see the benefits paid by ACHD, and it shows Med 3 and Den 3. That's our family medical and dental. Air St. Luke's, the Percy benefits, the other benefits that we offer, and the value of those came up to just under $38,000. There's also optional benefits that people may take advantage of, the 401k match, our gym membership, our wellness program. Those also add into that. If someone were to take advantage of all of those optional benefits, you're looking at, just over $98,000 value. Of course, that's not what they are taking home, but that is the value of the benefit package that they receive. You can see the graph over on the right side still shows that salary is the main component. So being able to focus on pay as a part of our total rewards opportunities is still very important, even though we have a very good benefit program. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows the value of the time off benefits. This is not an added cost to the district, but it does have a dollar value in the sense that this is the time that they have to be away from work. If it's an illness, they may use FTO to celebrate holidays or to take a much needed vacation. So that just kind of shows you the value of the PTO. Okay. Moving on. So getting back to the salary survey and kind of what we're looking for, obviously the objective with the salary survey is to recruit and retain the best qualified employees that we can. The last updates that we had to our salary structure was 5 years ago in 2017. At that time, we adjusted our hourly structure by 10%, and we adjusted our salaried structure by 3.7%. It's important to point out that was an adjustment to the structure. Those were not the individual increases that employees received. That was an adjustment to our start rates, our midpoints, and our maximum by those percentage points. In terms of the economy, I think it's an understatement to say that the economy is changing, but it is. But right now, we are experiencing historic inflationary rates. We are experiencing a labor shortage. All employers are competing for the same very limited workforce. You've probably heard it to be said that it is an employee market, and that's a very true statement. Employees have a lot of choices out there, and so we want to be the employer of choice, and part of that is through having a competitive pay structure. The survey methodology for the salary survey, we utilize a benchmarking process, which means that we are reviewing the entire compensation structure. We benchmark 50 positions within the district, and those positions represent a cross-section of knowledge, skills, experience of different positions here at the district. We are not looking at every single position at the district, but again, we're just benchmarking approximately those 50 positions in an effort to look at the entire compensation structure. We're not looking at pay classifications for individual positions. One of the things when we do a salary survey, currently we look at what is competitive, and competitive means that we're within 5% plus or minus of market. Now that's where we've been. That may not be where we need to be moving forward in today's market. So part of the salary survey will help us to look at that and strategize to determine, is 5% the right mark? Maybe we need to be at market exactly in order to be competitive. But those are questions that, again, we want to gain from the salary survey. Again, just to repeat, it is a focus on the organization as a whole. It's not looking at specific positions on an individual basis. We will be utilizing a compensation consultant to do the salary survey for us. Again, part of their role will be to determine the market competitiveness for both pay structures, hourly and salary. We also will be looking at both public and private sectors, and we'll also be looking at both local and regional data. Again, in the past, we've really focused on just the public sector, but in today's market, we really need to be competitive with the private as well, given the limited workforce. We'll be reviewing the current pay structures and the job hierarchy. Our current pay structure has been in place for many years, and it's possible that we may have outgrown it, and it may be time to look at a different type of structure. Again, that is something that we will be utilizing the consultant to assist us with. You know, a pay structure that works with 200 people, maybe there would be something that would be more effective for us now that we're certainly much larger than we were. And then also the consultant will provide us with implementation costing. So what is it going to cost to implement what they find in the salary survey? It's important to point out that when we do a salary survey, that does not mean that every employee receives an increase across the board. That means that our structures will be adjusted based on our new start rates. Fall below those levels. So if they fall below a new start rate, they'll be brought up to the new start rate. Or if they fall below a step move, they'll be brought up to the new step move. But those people that are past those marks, or for example, those that may be in the salaried pay structure that don't have step moves, they would not be eligible for those. It would just simply be the new start rates. Okay. We do expect our salary survey to be completed in early summer, and then we will come back to you with the results as well as a recommendation for the implementation of the salary survey. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sherry. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your time the other day to kind of walk through this with the questions that I had.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
Madam President? Sherry, thank you so much for this. I really appreciated learning about all the different mechanisms you have in place for folks that are doing really well and are contributing and having a tremendous positive impact on the district, are paid well for that. And I guess these were the types of details that I was looking for a couple weeks ago, it's like, okay, what are we all doing as a whole benefits package, right? And how does this 1% COLA fit into all these different levers that we have? So thank you for doing this today. This is really, really helpful. And I also just support you in looking at the private sector, because we just have to be mindful of those other salaries and benefits that the private sector is also increasing, and understanding that the public sector, they're competing with us too. So I think that's a great move, and looking forward to the results from the contractor.
Absolutely. I would just echo that too. The landscape has changed so drastically, especially since COVID, that we really need to take a tight look at that, because we are competing. So I'm glad you're on top of that. Commissioner Hanson?
Madam President, yeah, and Sherry, thanks. I would love to see just a quantification of what that 10% employee performance, you know, we take 10% of the employees, they get a performance boost. What's the dollar amount there, so that we can evaluate whether in fact going to 20% might be, you know, obviously it's like if somebody's right at the 10%, they're the 11th percent.
Sure.
It's like, oh darn, I would have loved to have included you. There might be some opportunity to recognize that that person, being able to keep that person, maybe going to 20% or 15% or 30%.
Sure.
I don't know what those dollar implications are to the budget, because my guess is the people we are likely to lose are the people who are really good, but we just can't give them that little added benefit. And so that might be something, and I don't have a clue
We can do
what
that.
the overall dollar amount of that program is. That would be helpful.
We can do that.
Very good. Any other
Madam
questions?
President,
Commissioner
yes, just a quick, one question and maybe a comment. The survey that we're doing, the study that you've got a consultant doing, what is the cost of that?
So the cost will be up to $29,000 to do that. We're working with Milliman Consulting. We haven't finalized the agreement with them, but that is the initial proposal. They actually do quite a bit of work for the state of Idaho. And as a part of that, we're fortunate to be able to also gain some of that additional data from the state of Idaho's survey. So I think it'll be a very beneficial process for us.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. And I agree, this is very important information. It's very worthwhile. And I have to admit, this may appear quibbling, but it's hard for me to view FICA as an employee benefit. The employer has to pay it, and the employee has to pay part of it. It's just a tax. It is a cost, so it does come into the total amount of what ACHG pays per employee, but I have a hard time viewing that as a benefit.
Understood.
Madam President, thank you again. You know, I've probably made as many comments as anybody about this approach to things since I've been on the commission, and I've actually been familiar with these since the late 70s. And FICA is part of a package. My question to you is, are the more geezerly among us the ones that are more concerned about culture than the younger set?
I would say no. I think culture is important to everyone. It may mean different aspects, for others. Some people come into a work environment and that camaraderie and that team, meeting people and forming those relationships is really important. For other people, they want to come in and they want to do their job and they want to go home, but I think there are similarities across the age groups in what people are looking for.
Well, that's good, because decades ago, it seemed to me at the time when I was actually presenting these to employees on behalf of their employers, that it did make kind of a difference. And so I'm actually happy to hear that it's not as much. And maybe we can ask those kinds of questions as we go through this. Thanks very much.
Good comments, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Madam President, just a little quip as a different generational commissioner. I would say culture does matter, but as someone that's going to be having to pay for childcare in a few months, culture only goes so far when you can't afford childcare, gas, student loan bills, all those things. So that's why I'm also really excited that you're looking at maintaining the culture while also looking at the budgetary salary and benefit packages that we can offer. Because it's all one piece, one big bundle.
Keep an eye on that hard line. Yeah. Right. Okay, very good. All right, see no other questions or comments. Sherry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you would, I would like you to lead us in the pledge when we
I'd
get to
be
that
happy
point.
to. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it, I think we, are we?
I think we have a couple minutes.
Yeah. We haven't.
We're there.
We can wait. Was it like 10 seconds? Okay. You give us the go sign. Okay, welcome everyone. Sherry, if you will.
If you'd please join us. I pledge allegiance
Of the United States. With liberty and justice. Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to our commission meeting. Happy to see everybody in the audience. Our members in the audience continues to grow, so that's nice to see. So welcome to all of you. Our first item of business is to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Next, the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I would move to approve the consent agenda.
All right, thank you.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. That takes us to our regular agenda. We have one item today, and that is the State Street Premium Corridor Infrastructure Raise Grant presentation by Stephen Hunt. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Commission. My name is Stephen Hunt. Glad to be here this afternoon. So, thank you, Commission President, members of the Commission. My name is Stephen Hunt. I'm the Development Director of Valley Regional Transit, and today's presentation is about the State Street Raise Grant and the opportunity for the ACHD Commission to consider co-sponsorship and a funding request and a funding contribution to this project. There'll be four parts of what I'm going to cover today. Just the briefest of summaries of what the State Street Raise Grant is about. Came last month and presented on that more in detail. We'll provide an overview of what the co-sponsorship and the request is about, and then get into some of the details that we've been able to develop around the benefits of the Raise Grant. So since we were last here, we've continued to refine the elements of the Raise Grant and identify and quantify the benefits of each of those components, and then come back to the local funding request and co-sponsorship. So to begin with, the State Street Raise Grant is a request that we're making of the US DOT for $8.5 million. The project total is 10.6 million, and we will be raising 2.1 million in local funds. The project will cover bicycle and pedestrian improvements along State Street at a number of intersections, improving transit passenger amenities all along the corridor, and installing infrastructure that will allow us to do on-route charging and fully electrify the State Street corridor. There are other planning and design components in it, and but as a package, the elements benefit all riders, all users of the State Street corridor, whether you're on transit, a pedestrian, a cyclist, a motorist, or just living along the corridor. So the co-sponsorship requests that we're making of ACHD, same requests that we're making of other agencies along the corridor, including the City of Boise, Idaho Transportation Department, Capital City Development Corporation, and ACHD. We've been working with each of those organizations as part of the State Street coordinated, or the State Street coordination, and we have discussed co-sponsoring and financial contributions from each of those agencies. The financial contribution is based on each agency's responsibility on the corridor, and those contributions are requested to cover the local funding needs of the project. So I wanted to share with you some exciting stuff that we've been able to pull together as we've gone through the development of the RAISE grant. So the main portion of the RAISE grant, of any RAISE grant, is the benefit cost analysis, or the CBA, and we have been working closely with each of the different agencies to identify the project elements that will make sense for us to forward with this grant, and then also determining what the cost benefit of each of those elements are. So the good news that we are able to share is that we do have a positive cost benefit analysis with this project. There are three main quantifiable benefit areas, and those are in reduced transit travel time, improved safety, and enhanced facilities for the transit riders. There are other qualitative benefits that weren't able to be monetized and included in the CBA, but are included by reference, and those are the electrification of the corridor, which would result in emission reductions and in reduction in noise along the corridor, as well as the other connectivity improvements for non-motorized transportation. I wanted to point out one other thing: the increase in ridership and use of non-motorized travel on the corridor isn't specifically quantified, other than in the benefits that are accruing in the reduced travel time. So that's another, while it could be quantified, it wasn't monetized in terms of the benefit for the CBA, the cost benefit analysis. So I was just going to speak to each of those different benefit areas briefly. The first and largest being the improvements in transit travel time. And those were achieved by the investments such as the off-board fare payments. So that's the ticket vending machines that are identified to invest in the corridor. The near-level boarding, so that's a higher curb along the corridor at a number of stops, so that people can easily get on and off the bus, which reduces the amount of time that the bus is stopped in traffic, what we call dwell time. We also have a reduction in travel time because of moving a few stops to the far side. This is consistent with the efforts that we've been making with ACHD over the years to move our stops far side, both for transit travel time benefits, but also for safety and other benefits to the riding public. The in-lane stops, which are part of the State Street Transit operational analysis and included in this grant proposal, also reduce the amount of time that it takes for transit to serve the stop and keep it moving down the corridor. Moving bicycle lanes behind bus stops reduces conflict points, so there's a safety benefit there, but there's also a transit travel time benefit by, again, not having that conflict point and making the bus stop and the riders closer to their location of boarding. So those benefits are broken out on the slide here between transit travel time, so that's the amount of time that it takes to travel down the corridor, and dwell time savings. And what I wanted to point out here is that the improvements are both in the travel time savings, that is the speed of the transit down the corridor, but most of them actually accrue in the dwell time savings, which is significant because that's also the area that has the biggest impact on general purpose traffic. So this is the time that the bus is stopped in lane, and that might be impacting general purpose traffic that's navigating to get around the buses. So improvements in dwell time have added benefits not only for the people on the bus, but also everybody who's traveling in the corridor. In sum, these improvements would reduce the transit travel time in the corridor by almost 10%, and that's where, again, the majority of the the benefit, at least that were quantified in the cost benefit analysis. Benefits that come from the project are focused on, that I wanted to speak to now, are focused on multimodal improvements. So these are the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements. We looked at the multimodal level of service, which was a tool that HDR, our consultant, has been working on, has been using on other projects applied to this project in particular, and assess the level of service at various intersections along the corridor. And the grant would improve the multimodal level of service at each of the intersections where we're making investments. In particular, the multimodal level of service at State and 23rd would go from a level C up to a level A. 27th would also improve from D to C and E to D. Each of those intersections at least having one grade improvement in level of service. And what's driving that improvement in level of service is improved pedestrian crossings, curb protected bike lanes, increased visibility of non-motorized travel. So whether that's, again, bike lanes or crossings, pedestrian crossings, and then also reducing conflict points at those intersections. So this was really encouraging to see that the concepts that we've been working with each of the different jurisdictions along the corridor, ACHD staff, resulting in improvements in levels of service up and down the corridor. The other result that we did quantify are the safety benefits and crash reductions. So this is related to, but different from, the improvements in multimodal levels of service. Those improvements were quantified and monetized in the safety and crash reductions section of the application. And so we looked at where will we be seeing reductions in crashes along the corridor. This looked at all different types of crashes, whether those were injury crashes, property impacts, or fatalities, and then forecast what the reduction in crashes could be with these improvements. The largest improvement, again, in crash reduction occurred at State and 23rd, and that was a 50% reduction in forecasted crashes, total crashes at that intersection. And then that's over the life of the project, which I believe was a 30-year horizon. And then at State and 27th, that is, I think, a 40% reduction in crashes. Gary and Bunch had a smaller reduction in crashes, but also significant at 14 and 18% reductions in crashes. The drivers for those crash reductions were driven by similar types of improvements that resulted in improvements in the multimodal levels of service, as well as the transit travel time reductions, so the moving buses to the far side, increasing the visibility of the bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, median treatments, things that are going to make it safer for all users in the corridor. So we were excited to be able to share these quantifiable benefits with the Commission and our other partners as we are requesting co-sponsorship and funding requests. Oh, I got ahead of myself. The last one, which was the smallest in terms of quantifiable improvements, was the enhanced facilities. So this is the passenger amenities at various intersections and stops along the corridor, real-time information, seating, shelters. Those are the types of improvements, and there was a way there is an approved way of quantifying those benefits. This is essentially what's the value to the transit rider to have that type of amenity at the bus stop. There's a way to monetize that, and that was the other component in the cost benefit analysis for the project. And so together, all of those improvements all of those monetized benefits make the cost benefit analysis for the proposed project a positive CBA, and we're excited again to be able to share that with each of the potential funding partners and co-sponsors. So I wanted to get back to that. What is our request of the Commission and our other co-sponsors on this project? The co-sponsorship and funding requests really grew out of the State Street coordinated efforts. Each of these co-sponsors are part of the State Street coordination efforts that have been going on for multiple years. And you can see on this slide and included in your packet both the project total that are for each of the components that the different co-sponsors would be most relevant to, and then the specific local request, which is 20% of the project total, totaling up the total local request for the project of 2.1 million. We have worked with ACHD earlier last year to, well, one of the benefits, rather, that Valley Regional Transit brings to any of our partners is the ability to support local projects with federal funds. In light of that, we worked with ACHD last year to develop a mechanism whereby we could bring the opportunity of federal funds to the commission for your consideration to match with local dollars. And so this is an ideal opportunity, we feel like, that matches that scenario where we've got a competitive project that could bring significant federal funds to the region and support ACHD on a number of projects in your right-of-way. And then finally, the other thing that we wanted to mention is with all of our partners, any contribution amount is helpful. There's a couple of different things that we're trying to accomplish with the co-sponsorship. One is legitimately to raise the local funding for the project, but also by increasing the financial contributions and co-sponsorships of the various partners along the corridor, we feel that strengthens the grant application itself. And so any contribution amount is helpful, whether that's the full amount that is requested here, which again is driven off of specific projects that we'll speak to here in just a moment, or whatever is available to each of our different co-sponsors. So specifically for the ACHD request, we're requesting $239,000, which is the local portion of the projects that are envisioned at both 23rd and 27th. These are the two intersections that have the highest improvements in terms of multimodal levels of service, as well as reduction in crashes. And again, the improvements are driven by the higher visibility crossings, the curb protected bike lane on the north side, and this is at 23rd, and then at 27th, moving the transit amenities and higher level near level boarding out at the bus stop, help improve the amenities for the transit passengers, reduce dwell time at this intersection, also connecting the bike lanes north-south to a lower stress pathway, which I think is I forget the name of it, but it's the frontage street in front there between State Street and the homes. But then connecting that to the bike lanes that continue south on 26th or 27th. At this end, at the other end of 23rd, it does the same thing. So those are the specific projects that we would be requesting ACHD funding for would be the non-motorized improvements at 23rd and 27th that would have a benefit on all of the multimodal users going through those intersections and resulting in improved levels of service, reduction in transit delay, and reduction in crashes at those intersections as well. So the request that we would like to make of the commission today is that you consider being a raised grant co-sponsor with a financial contribution of up to $239,000 of local funding to support the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure at State and 23rd and State and 27th. And with that, I would be happy to stand for any questions. I failed to mention at the beginning of my presentation that Kelly Bedesheim is also available for any questions on the line, and we're happy to be here for this discussion.
Thank you, Stephen. It's always good to see you and have you come and give us an update. I do have a question. I came to a couple of your earlier meetings, and initially the request of ACHD was to provide a letter of support. And it was repeated several times that there was no request for financial contribution. So we honored that. The commission approved a letter, and that was sent to you. And then when we received the packet, the content of the letter that we submitted in support of your efforts to apply for this grant had been edited with my SIG block, and a line had been inserted with a six-figure amount of taxpayer funds as a contribution from us. And my concern is that was done with absent any sort of conversation. So I kind of want you to explain how we got from sending in a letter, because the impression, and I'm sure it was unintended, is okay, we support your efforts. We honored the ask that was made to us, gave it back, and it's like, well, okay, we got this letter of support signed by the commission president, approved by all members of the commission, but that's not enough. We're going to rewrite it, and we're going to put this out there in the packet. So did this packet go to the other jurisdictions that you have on your slide? I'm
Commissioner
curious.
President, yes,
Yeah.
a similar packet was sent out through the State Street executive teams to each of the different co-sponsors.
So my concern is, irregardless of the calculus that those other jurisdictions are using, the fact that a packet has gone out listing ACHD with a line item of financial contribution, it gave the impression, a false impression, that we had already had the discussion amongst the commission and agreed to that. And, you know, unintended or not, it does add a little weight to the VRT request. And I know we had that discussion about you being able to come back and speak to us about it, but it just seemed to me we were putting the cart before the horse a little bit there. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Price, but I believe our agreement initially was, in the event that VRT is awarded a grant, then you would come back to us for matching funds and fill out an application. So am I reading from the wrong document, or am I incorrect? Mr. Price.
Madam President, Commissioner Steve Price, General Counsel for ACHD. I don't have that agreement specifically in front of me. It was an addendum to an existing agreement. I know that the language says that they have to submit an application. I can't remember the timing of whether it's after they get the grant or as part of an application.
Well, that's just what I'm reading here.
Okay, well.
Section 17.4, contribution. In the event that VRT is awarded a grant by an entity, then they can come back and
Okay.
ask for them. And that was my understanding when Stephen was here before. And I think we had that motion and said, certainly you have the ability to come back, apply for the funds, et cetera. So it just seems to me, so if you could kind of walk me through your thought process on redoing the letter and sending it out in the, with the packet to the other jurisdictions, and then have you been able to secure funding from the other jurisdictions that are listed in your packet? Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
That was several bundled in there.
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam President. I'll take them beginning with the packet. First of all, when I said that a similar packet was sent out to the other potential co-sponsors, it did not include any draft letter from the commission. It was simply the background. I think so. There was 3 attachments in your packet today. It did not include the draft letter. It just included the breakdown by different co-sponsors as to what we would be requesting of them. So that was shared with each of the different co-sponsors in an effort to lay it out on the table what we would be requesting from each potential co-sponsor, and that initiated then the specific request of a dollar amount from each of those co-sponsors. As it relates to how the draft letter was created and put into the packet, I apologize for any confusion or misunderstanding about what our original requests were. But back in March, when we presented to the commission, we shared an overview of what the RAISE grant was going to be about. We requested the opportunity to come back and present to the commission the opportunity to do a co-sponsor with potential funding, with a funding request. We did not have what that specific funding request would be back in March, but we tried to make sure that it was clear to the commission that we would be requesting potential funding based on the finalization of the project details and further conversation with each of the different jurisdiction staff. So when we received the letter of support, which
was requested, I have to say, I think maybe we'll have to agree to disagree, but it was specifically stated, and I had come back for clarification that there was no financial request. It was just simply a letter of support, which we wholeheartedly did with the consensus of the entire commission, that we absolutely support your application for the raise grant.
Yes, and we appreciate that. It did make it a little bit awkward to think then about this particular presentation. We're coming back to say, so now there's a co-sponsorship opportunity. This isn't intended to be a slide in any way to the letter of support, but just to honor, well, to come back with our request for a potential funding amount. We took the details of the letter, added the letter of support, added what the funding request could be as a way of saying this is what a co-sponsorship with funding letter of support could look like. The intent was to make it clear to the commission what the specific request would be, and apologize if that came across as either ungrateful.
And I'm sure you can see where the confusion was, because we then when others received this packet, we received phone calls asking about it. So I think the impression was that this had already been taken care of, and then absent any conversation
Right.
from the time you received our letter of support to getting this new packet, there was just like, okay, I think there's a couple steps missing in between there, and then with the agreement that we have. So that was my question, since this seems to be then premature to the agreement that we had. So
Thank you, Madam President. Related to the agreement, there would be no contribution to Valley Regional Transit absent a successful award of the raise grant application. So we wouldn't be requesting $239,000 local funds unless the raise grant application was successful. The intent of having that and having that worded in the application is to help the reviewers understand that there is support from the individual jurisdictions, and if it is the commission's interest, including a financial contribution. So we didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to share that there is financial support for the project potentially from the different co-sponsors in the grant application, because we couldn't ask for that formally from the commission until after we were successfully awarded it. We're trying to make sure that there was the opportunity to highlight that fact in the grant application.
kind of line up all your pieces. Okay, so I'm sure you can understand my confusion, and like I say, we had not had any conversation, and I think a lot of people were just kind of caught by surprise a little bit that it had morphed from that to this. So I appreciate you walking me through that. And I have some more questions, but I want to see if the other commissioners, and I'm sure they do, have comments or questions. Commissioner McKinney?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam President. Stephen, just a couple of questions. Going back, first of all, to some of the sort of the details of the proposed project. When we talk about far side stops, we're talking about stops on far side of intersection versus near side of intersection. Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
That's correct.
And electrification, how does the electrification system work?
So what we would talk about with the electrification infrastructure would be on-route charging. So this would be a bus as it comes into Main Street Station would be able to hook up for the time that it's laying over there to recharge its batteries. That would extend the amount of time that the service could be out operating along the corridor.
So VRT will be as part of this project, they'd be purchasing some electric buses and installing the electrification infrastructure at the Main Street Station.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, the action would actually be the installation of the charging infrastructure itself. It wouldn't be purchase of additional electric vehicles.
So we currently have electric vehicles that we're using. How many of those do we have?
We currently have, I believe, 7. We will have 12 by the end of, certainly by the end of the year, but I think it's by the end of the summer.
Okay, so currently those get like recharged overnight at wherever they sleep at night?
Yes.
And they operate during the day. This will allow them to be recharged during the day at the Main Street station?
That is correct.
Okay. What is our current ridership on the State Street corridor?
The current ridership on State Street, I believe, is 500 to 600 boardings a day, I believe.
Okay, and how many buses is that divided among?
So in the peak periods, meaning from like 6 to 9 in the morning and from 3 to 6 in the afternoon, there's 15-minute service, and at that level of service, there are 4 vehicles that are assigned to the State Street route. In the middle of the day, at 30-minute service, there's just 2 vehicles assigned to the State Street route.
Okay, so then what's the average ridership per vehicle? And I know it differs between peak hours and off-peak, but if I were to, on a peak hour, stop a bus at random and count the number of passengers on it, how many would I find?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, to be specific about, I think the question you're asking for what the average load factor is on the bus,
I suppose, yeah.
which is, to be clear, which is different than the average, like passenger served by a bus. And the average load factor on the State Street route, I don't know. It obviously varies as you travel along the route, getting larger as you move closer into the city of Boise, and then decreasing as you are traveling out on State Street, typically.
Right. So, but what's kind of a range? What would be a ballpark number?
At the max load point for the State Street route in the morning, you should be over 10, but I would have to verify that. I don't know.
Okay, so 10 is about the maximum.
That might be right.
Okay, let me then I guess one of the things in going through this the discussion of the benefits of this project, crash reduction is one of them. I have to admit though, when looking at crash reduction as a percentage, I'm not sure is a really good way to look at it, because it would be relevant to know the numbers we're dealing with. You know, if it's a 50% reduction and we go from 2 to 1, that's different than a 50% reduction from 300 to 150. Likewise, severity of accidents is also a relevant factor. So just looking at those numbers, I feel like doesn't tell the whole picture. I imagine you don't have the details in front of you, but that's important information to be aware of when looking at that factor. Okay, then finally, and I guess this may not be a question for you, Stephen, but perhaps for our general counsel. What the request for funding, contribution from ACHD, how does that square with ACHD's? I know we have certain restrictions related to funding transit and so on. And I'm wondering if you can just clarify where this falls in.
Sure, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, with all of ACHD's funding sources, as you know, the bulk of them are restricted. The funding is restricted to the construction, reconstruction, and maintenance of roads. There is one funding source, which is a sales tax that we get. We get about $2.5 million a year that has no specific earmarking on that. And that is a portion of that sales tax is what we fund commuter ride with. That is also available to fund other public transportation needs.
Okay, how much of that is currently being used for commuter ride?
I believe in the budget and annually is about $200,000.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
that's all I have.
You bet. Commissioner
President?
Hanson.
Just a couple of questions, because I gather, did you say someone wants to testify? Okay.
They'll testify after
Okay.
we're
Quick question. I really appreciate the quantification, the kind of details on the comprehensive cost-benefit analysis, and the analysis of not just how much people who do take the bus and walk and bike, but also how that helps people who are driving in the corridor, because the corridor is not going to get any bigger. The corridor is the corridor. And of course, you know, when with 10 cars, that's 10 people on a bus, that's 10 cars that are on the road. The description you have of this, of the items that you've identified are bicycle and pedestrian improvements, which to me, we do this all the time. And is that the understanding is that since we do pedestrian and bicycle improvements, in fact, I think we improved, yeah, in our consent, on our consent agenda, we approved $948,000 in a project that included bicycle and pedestrian improvements and a bridge and so forth. So we do that all the time. Is that one of the reasons why you pick these? Because that's what we do all the time, all over the place, is make those kind of improvements on the street.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, yes, the request both of ACHD and all of our partners was focused on the improvements that would be relevant to each of those jurisdictions' jurisdiction. So I think it's $1.something million is the project total for the projects that we would be requesting ACHD local support for would be capital infrastructure that is on the roadway supporting bike and ped and infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be explicitly, it's not for transit operations, it's not even for transit passenger amenities. This would be for just essentially the concrete and adjustments to the bike and ped infrastructure around the transit stops.
Yeah. So that's very helpful, because I think what that does is it tells us that the restrictions that Mr. Price identified in terms of our restrictions and ability to use funds for operating transits and transit amenities has to come from sales tax. But things like this, which are pedestrian facilities we pay for all the time out of our general sources, that restriction wouldn't apply. I think our resolution also capped what we could make available at $500,000. And so this is, you know, less than half of that. So I had another question, but I forgot. It'll
We'll come
to me.
back. Okay.
Madam President?
Mr. Goldthorpe.
I actually have several questions, if that's okay. And I'm asking these questions under the assumption that we're successful, that you're successful in applying for this grant, because that changes everything. As far as the timing of these projects go, in your opinion, how does this interface with the timing of projects in the similar geographic area that ACHD already has planned for?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I don't have a deep understanding of all of the different projects that ACHD is working on in the State Street corridor. We would be hoping to go into construction in the next, have all of these components constructed by 2026. That obviously would, so if we were successful, that would bring things into your 5-year integrated work plan.
And my question then for our staff is, according to our 5-year integrated work plan, is that a possibility? And if there's no one here who can answer that, that's fine. That's fine. But there apparently is.
Here she comes. Welcome, Diane.
Madam President, Commissioners, Diane Bevins, Manager of Capital Projects and Acting Deputy Director of Plans and Projects today. I'll do my best to answer because I also don't have a list or a map of all the projects in that area in front of me. But knowing that we have until 2026, I don't see a problem with working around these projects and coordinating with these projects.
Okay, that's an important yes. Now, who will be in charge, or who would control, once this grant is awarded, who would be in control of the planning, bidding, and construction timetables?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I believe that would be Valley Regional Transit in coordination with ACHD and the other agencies.
Okay, that's probably not a good answer, but I appreciate the honesty. Thank you very much.
I I would add, Madam President and Commissioner Goldthorpe, that as we move into construction, and so should we be awarded the grant, and as we move into implementing it, details around bidding and construction, we would continue to work out with our State Street partners. So if there are advantages of it being done differently, we would be open to working that out.
Here's another one for Diane. In as much as some of these projects we already have some kind of a timeline for projects within the rights of way that are described at these two intersections. Are any of those projects in jeopardy in terms of having to be redone from our particular existing timetable? Would we just have to tear out what's done under this grant and redo it?
President May, Commissioners, I would have to get back to you on that answer. If we're thinking about the State Street corridor in particular and the widening of that to 7 lanes, then I would have to go look at when that's programmed, and if they're putting in infrastructure that isn't set back at that. But I think down at 23rd and 27th, the 7 lanes doesn't go down that far. So I would have to look into the State Street projects and additional projects in that area to get an answer for you.
Thanks, Diane. I think that would be important to know.
Yeah. I have a follow-on since Diane's up here real quick, and then Commissioner Pickering has some questions. As far as our projects go, and I know we've had a little bit of concern has been expressed about any premature allocation of funding for projects then before the full widening of State Street, that then anything that's put into it would be throwaway. So I think maybe that's
yes, exactly.
marries up with what Commissioner Goldthorpe's concern was. So I would like that to have that answer as well. So if that's one you're going to have to research.
Yes, President May. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking the 7-lane widening ends before 27th and 23rd. Yeah, it's at Whitewater Park Boulevard. So that particular issue of the 7-lane widening would not be an issue. If they're installing infrastructure, which I know they are, west, between Glenwood and Whitewater Park Boulevard, if they're installing infrastructure with this project, it could be throwaway if the 7-lane right-of-way and setbacks are not accounted for.
Okay. And that would be up by where the St. Mary's, you had the conceptual drawing of the right-of-way. That's 27.
27th, yeah.
President, yeah, that's 27th. And if I could, I would just like to
Thank you, Diane.
say we have been very appreciative of the support that we've had from ACHD staff. And a lot of these kinds of questions have come up as we've worked with them on preparing this grant application. And we have changed the scope of the application to address these concerns such that there aren't any concrete improvements that we're making that are not at the current 7-lane extents. We initially had some projects in there. As we were developing the grant application, we pulled those out to ensure that there aren't, that we're not complicating things as we move forward with future plans to widen to 6th and 7th lane. There are amenities that we're planning on implementing, say, at Pierce Park, which is an intersection that's being designed right now, and those would be installed after that project is complete, supporting the completion of that project, the transit amenity components, for example. So the pieces of the RAISE grant itself are focused on those locations where the improvements would be not impinging on future projects that would widen State Street out to 6th and 7th lane. Those have been active conversations, and I wouldn't say that we haven't been trying to figure that out, but that's been the work that we've been doing with ACHD staff today. And I would just, again, like to thank them in front of you for their support on shaping the scope of this project to fit those concerns.
Okay. So, but to your point, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I would like to know definitively, because I know in the packet that we got, it did show 27th, and so I think some of those areas were going to be impacted by the full widening of State Street. So I just want to be clear on exactly what what we are addressing here today. But thank you, Diane. Commissioner Pickering, you're up.
Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation and the packet. I think my question dovetails into what you just kind of explained. Could you just walk us through why 27th and 23rd? And obviously, as somebody that's traveled along the corridor a lot, I can definitely see the need, but I'd love to hear your perspective. And if obviously staff assisted in making sure that those were where these investments would be heavily allocated, I'd love to know more about that.
So the bus, thank you, Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, the bus stops at 23rd is a near side stop. It's in lane. I think there's just two lanes of traffic that are headed westbound at that point. It widens out to 3 lanes westbound just after the signal. And there's an opportunity for us to be able to move that stop from a near side location to a far side location, taking advantage of that extra lane and making it a better place for transit to connect. It also, when we were looking at just moving that bus stop, we identified other opportunities to connect the bicycle lane on 27th to a lower stress option traveling east-west along State Street, which is that state lane, I think is what it's called. So it would make that connection across State Street just a higher visibility crossing. It also introduced a new crossing on the west side of that intersection. So there were, as we looked at the opportunity of just moving that bus stop from a near side to a far side location, which has its own independent utility, we saw opportunities to address other issues at that particular intersection. At 23rd, we have very small median in between State Street and State Lane, and on the other side of that is a sidewalk, and that's actually where the bus stop shelter is at what did I say? I think I meant to say 27th if I didn't say 27th. At 27th, there's a very small median between State Lane and State Street, and then a sidewalk, and the bus shelter is on the other side of the State Lane on that sidewalk, which means if somebody is waiting for the bus in the shelter, they'd have to essentially get up, walk all the way across State Lane, and and then get on the bus at the curb of State Street. So what this project would do would move that shelter essentially closer to the curb, make that connection between the bus and the transit amenities easier. It also would create a connection again between State Lane and then the bicycle facilities around 26th, 27th, and develop a higher visibility crossing for bikes and peds again across State Street. So those were the improvements that we saw, and were particularly interesting because once you do both of those, you have a connection between them on the north side. So that was what was exciting about 23rd and 27th.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay. I'm just looking at the pictures here, Stephen. So we've got 26th, 27th, 31st, veterans, etc. So that's where I was a little bit concerned about the throwaway aspect of any sort of funding. So
Madam
if we
President?
could get a little bit more information from staff on that, I would appreciate that.
And Madam President, the improvements around veterans again are at a newly designed intersection that are at its ultimate extent. So there were some projects in between there that we had pulled out. I suppose the one exception would be at 30, like Whitewater, where we would be moving that stop from a near side to a far side location. That ultimately could be changed with widening of that street. It's not a huge project in terms of the amount of infrastructure that's going there. Essentially, we're building a bus pad on the far side of that location, but it does move a stop to a far side, which is one of the things that we're trying to accomplish, and it would help make that improvement until the rest of the State Street is built out.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Commissioner Hanson.
Madam President and Stephen, having been around a long time on the State Street TTOP, the contemplated additional lanes to the west of Whitewater is not for just general traffic, but for HOV and transit. So the contemplation was that those would be transit lanes and HOV. We don't have authority to have HOV lanes yet, but in the future, hopefully, that would be the case. And I really appreciate that you have taken that into consideration so that there won't be those kind of cost losses. So my reading of this with respect to 27th and 23rd is that this is the configuration that we've already agreed to under this State Street TTOP. And that the whole reason why we built Whitewater Boulevard was in fact to direct traffic from State Street to downtown through Fairview and Maine. And that's why it was designed that way. That's why it was designed so wide, and that's what its purpose is. So I really appreciate that has been incorporated into this.
Thank you, Stephen. Commissioners, any other questions before we, Stacy, you mentioned that we might have somebody that.
Yes, Mr. Maxend would like to testify.
Jeremy?
So, Jeremy,
All right.
anytime.
We can't hear you, Jeremy.
Welcome, Jeremy.
Oh yeah, he's not
That's always-
muted, but we're not hearing him. Sam? Oh,
He's trying.
yeah, microphones. Oh. We're checking on our end, but can you get off and back on really quick and maybe, oh, so other people can hear him on Zoom. And is there a is our volume not up?
Oh, there you are. Okay. Jeremy, if you just state your name and your address, please, and then, you bet.
As the things that by Mr. Hunt. I also recently did a walk, what we would call a walk audit, a roll audit, as a wheelchair, on different sections of State Street, and there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done on infrastructure infrastructure, to make, transit by pedestrians along that corridor safe, kind of improve the quality of service of bus riders accessing transit on that corridor. Last thing I'll say is I appreciate competing interests that you have to grapple with as you steward public funds, and that's a critical role you play, probably the most critical role. And it's not an easy decision to make this kind of investment, set this kind of precedent, but I think it's warranted. I think it's a valuable investment. And again, I just want to wholeheartedly provide my support for the project and for ACHD financially supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I do have another one.
Okay.
Eric?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name's Eric Wilson. I live at 4906 White Melissa Street, Boise, Idaho 83703. I sent this in email this morning, but want to make sure it got into the record before any considerations were made. I just wanted to voice my support and urge you to vote for the co-sponsorship and financial contribution for the RAISE grant. One of my family's greatest concerns living so close to State Street is the concentration of air pollutants and respiratory disease that many residents in our neighborhood wrestle with. I sent along a photo from a map of census tracts and respiratory disease in the email if you want to view that at some point. But along the State Street corridor, over 10% of residents have asthma or other respiratory disease along the corridor. And in the absence of heavy industry development, I think it's fairly safe to assume that these poor public health outcomes are due to transportation-related emissions, something that you can impact positively by supporting co-sponsorship and financially contributing to this RAISE grant. My wife and I are especially concerned for the health of our one-year-old daughter as the number of people traveling along State Street grows, especially in Northwest Ada County. Providing safe and accessible multimodal transportations along the State Street corridor, including public transit, walking, cycling, and other micromobility options, can allow residents to access services along State Street safely without getting in their vehicle, and can reduce the number of single occupancy vehicle trips and vehicle miles traveled. This would also result in other ancillary benefits like reducing traffic congestion, a reduced cost of operating roads and maintenance needs, and also better environmental outcomes. Thank you for considering my comments today.
Thank you, Eric.
Madam President, just a comment for Eric. First of all, thank you for your testimony. Second of all, I think you're probably completely aware of how little our Idaho legislature as a whole considers the emission pollution problem an actual problem in this state any longer. So I hope you understand that it doesn't seem to matter how many of us consider it a real problem. They've made that decision for us. And I'm speaking as someone who is not only intimately aware of all the details about emission testing, but profoundly affected by the things that you have indicated in your testimony in terms of the results of emission-related pollution. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. No more? Okay. Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
Madam President?
No? Oh. Commissioner Pickering.
We did also receive, I don't think, Stacy, you were CC'd on it, but we did receive as a commission just before, I think just before the meeting, we also received a letter from a neighborhood association president. Is that worth reading out to the public since we've received that, but you weren't included on that? I just want to make sure it gets into the record.
Yeah, to be in the record. Yeah.
I think it
Did it come to all of us?
did come to all of us.
Okay.
But Madam President, do you mind if I read it really quick?
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is from Katie Decker. It just says, as a resident and neighborhood association president along the State Street corridor, I urge you to provide matching funding and co-sponsorship toward the federal grant to improve bicyclist and pedestrian infrastructure along State Street. Currently, the inconsistent infrastructure for active transportation along State Street acts as a barrier in our community, which State Street bisects and leads to increased reliance on automobiles even for short trips, due to the perceived concerns with safety and lack of connectivity for residents wishing to travel by foot or by bike. Over half of our neighborhood residents earn less than 80% of the AMI, and over 30% are living below the poverty line. Increasing the safety, connectivity, and availability of foot, bike, and bus connections in this area will form a tangible benefit in the lives of thousands of people living along State Street, and I urge you to support it. Thank you, Katie Decker.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments for Stephen? Okay, Stephen, you can, your excuse. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I just wanted, for everybody out there, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we do support their application process, and we did provide a letter of support to assist in their application process. So, Commissioner Hanson.
So, Madam President, with that, I would move to approve the co-sponsorship with a contribution of $239,000 with as requested by VRT and its partners.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Madam President?
Hold on one second, Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, Madam President, I would like to make a substitute motion. And that is we defer making a decision on this until all the questions that have been asked by the commission are answered.
So we have a substitute motion. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second that. And let me just add that one of the questions I think needs to be asked, and that we haven't even discussed at this point, is even if we wanted to give the money that they're requesting, how would that fit in with our budget? We haven't even looked at that, where it would come from. One question was suggested that here's a part of money or a source of funding that we have that could potentially be used, but that's still very vague. That's still not very, very specific enough for us to make a decision. I think we need to get more details before we make any kind of decision.
Okay, a little too preliminary.
Madam President.
Okay, I would also support that substitute motion. Commissioner Pickering?
Just to be mindful, when we put all of our ducks in a row to apply for our RAISE grant application, the deadline is April 15th. And so to defer it, you didn't specify a timeline.
They're going to apply for the grant anyway. Our decision.
That's not my point.
Okay.
You did not specify a timeline.
Well,
their deadline is April 15th.
Okay.
Oh, it's 14th? Excuse me, it's 14th. And that puts a really big burden on them to be able to apply for this with all of the documentation that they need. Because the impact that us not contributing, that's going to shift the 20% local match allocation across to those other partners. So that gives them 1 day to rewrite their entire application, which is deeply concerning and jeopardizes the whole point of why we wanted to support this project in the beginning.
My opinion is that may be the case, and I would be apologetic, not very, but apologetic somewhat, if the deadline was missed because of our not having the information we need.
I think, are you pushing it? Do you have a date certain? Just push it to.
Well, we'd have to make it for next week.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure
that wouldn't be a problem. I think it's unfortunate. Yeah. Diane, we're glad you're here. And then would Justin be back as well next week?
Yes, Justin will be back. So anyway, let's defer it until next week.
All right.
I would second that.
We have a motion.
Madam President,
Further discussion on the substitute motion.
Yes, Madam President. A couple things I want to clarify. It was clear to me when we passed a resolution last fall that down the road we would get a request, that there have been conversations with staff that this is about what we were going to do. I've been watching our own staff put together a RAISE grant proposal, and it's a very tight deadline to try and put all the ducks in a row. There's no commitment to appropriate this money until future fiscal years, because it's not there until the grant's approved. And we have allocated through budget adjustments significantly more than that, even within one fiscal year. I really appreciate the time constraints. My understanding was that, yes, in fact, they would be coming, and that they would be coming to us for something that we pay for anyway, pedestrian and bicycle improvements. This is a $1.4 million improvement on those two intersections, and we're only being asked to come up with $239,000. There's no other places where we can do this kind of pedestrian improvements, absent connection with some large capital maintenance project. So the return on that investment is huge. The other thing I really appreciate about this presentation is the amount of work in a short period of time that has gone into analyzing the cost-benefit analysis. Huge benefits in travel time has been quantified. We don't do that even on our own projects. Safety avoidance costs. We actually do talk a lot about the reason why we're doing certain projects is because of safety concerns, crash results, and they've quantified it right here. And the fact that we're going to be helping people on that corridor, you know, even there's 15 people, but of course, the reason we could get more people on a bus is that it's more reliable, more frequent. So 15, 20, 30 people driving internal combustion cars, riding in a vehicle that's electric powered. There's all these pieces are coming together. I'm tremendously impressed with the amount of commitment that the city of Boise is putting into this. And these are transportation. These are all transportation related. Granted, some are transit. But Boise is covering transportation costs in order to get these. And that I think we've been partners on the State Street TTOP for more than a decade. And to say our partnership is just about, you know, a letter of support that we don't, with all the budget, the money we budget each year and the money we spent even today to do various improvements like this, and then say, Boise, you still have to pay for, you have to pick up the other $239,000. I think that strains that relationship that we have with Boise and with our other partners. This is to me a no-brainer, and that we understand the corridor and the way that it's envisioned to have outside lanes for transit and HOV up to Whitewater, and then so that more transit, more multimodal activity can happen in those corridors. And the questions I think that have been raised don't warrant sidelining ACHT's participation in this. You can still get that confirmed from other sources if you want. In the meantime, I think we need to be a partner. We need to be a good faith partner with our partners on the State Street TTOP.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hanson. But I do agree that it's a little, we haven't even gotten into our budget deliberations, and I do believe having some answers to some of the questions that have been raised, we haven't even touched upon the right-of-way. And it's just come out, I know the earlier meetings, there was a discussion about right-of-way, and the comment was made that nope, that's not going to be impacted, and that has now shifted a little bit. So, you know, is ACHD going to be expected to do some condemning of right-of-way? There's still some significant unanswered questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call for the decision on the substitute motion.
Is there a date?
Yes, next Wednesday.
1 week. Pushing it 1 week. So substitute motion is before us. Commissioners, all those in favor, please signify by
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much, Stephen. We appreciate it. All right, next item, discussion items. Anybody from the public that would like to address? No? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned.
Madam President, I thought discussion items included from the commissioners.
We're doing that at the beginning. We don't have a post-commission. That we've shifted that to the beginning of the meeting under general housekeeping. Any comments or questions?
So I have a
So
question.
that way, and the reasoning behind that, Commissioner Hanson, was so that if a commissioner has an item or a concern, that staff then can potentially get the answers for us.
Okay, this is
So
for
that's
us.
why.
This is just for, I have a question for us as commissioners.
That's
Only
what
as
I'm-
commissioners. May may I raise that question?
Yeah, and then going forward, let's make sure we do it.
So, the day after we had our last meeting on March 23rd, March 24th, we received a letter from the Ada County Commissioners. All three commissioners wrote a letter raising some issues. And I want to know what the other commissioners thought of that and whether you would think we should take some action. I believe we should take some action. It raised some very serious concerns. It raised issues. I had a very different impression from when the director spoke to us about the selection process and whether people are screened out for the advisory committee, the impact fee advisory committee. And so I think we need to address those. I think in respect to the county commissioners, they've raised these issues. We need to respond as partners. And so I would raise that because we received this letter after we've last met. This is the first time we've met since.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. I'm not prepared to go into that, and I'm not sure if there has been a response or any sort of correspondence going forward, but we can certainly have a broader discussion on that at our next meeting. Mr. Price? This is on
Madam
the
President,
CICAC.
Commissioners, the only issue is that if you do, you'd put it on a commission agenda or a workshop and either list it as an action item or not. That's.
I would ask that we do that.
Okay. All right.
I would ask that we do that.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. Post-commission agenda, draft impact fee ordinance, draft fee. For Inselman.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Gary Inselman. It's our fourth work session on an interim update to our impact fee ordinance capital improvements plan. So today I'll briefly look at the changes proposed in the draft interim impact fee ordinance that was sent out to you for review. Go over comments from our advisory committees, discuss the affordable housing information and an option that you'd ask for, and next steps. So in the past work sessions, we reviewed the recommended items for change. I won't go into great detail unless you have questions on them. Again, have recommended increasing eligibility, impact fee eligibility of miscellaneous items for the CIP projects that we fund all of the design and construction costs, which means funding the unfunded list. We updated a couple of road segments based on the master street map and development activity. We will have made revisions to utilize the newest edition of the ITE Trip Generation Manual, the 11th edition. And then again, we added an affordable housing exemption. So unless there's any questions on those, again, I'll just proceed.
And thank you for doing the red line. I think Commissioner Hansen was the one that brought that up. That's just so much easier to follow along and rather than have to go through everything again. So thank you for doing that.
I might as well ask these questions because I really appreciate you giving me the red line, because I was searching through back on December 17th, the city of Boise made some recommendations to include, and we've also talked about in the past, previous updates to the ordinance, the inclusion of collectors. And so I don't see that in any of these. So the recommendations the city of Boise made on December 17th, they wrote a letter to the commission. I assume those would be evaluated and incorporated, but none of them are. And so what was our response to the city as to why we're not going to consider these and why? Because it seems to me these could be made within our authority under the statute, the recommendations that they made in their letter of December 17th. And
Madam
I'm going to go
President.
over what's in the letter. I just made a copy to remind myself.
Go ahead, Gary.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I did not make a response to the city. I mean, it was a letter, I believe, addressed to the commission. I would, if you direct me to. We had recommended items to the commission that could be accomplished by June as directed. Trying to add collectors or service areas is not something that could be accomplished by June. That's something that has to be considered in a major update. It includes a tremendous amount of work and other modeling data and other efforts, which again, we discussed possibly coming back at a later date and showing you what it would take to do that and some of the pros and cons. But at this time, it's not part of this effort, and we made that clear in each work session that we couldn't include that.
So one
Commissioner
question,
Hanson,
Madam
follow-up?
President and Gary. So yeah, they did ask to evaluate service areas and overlay service areas and the whole notion of the nexus, which is probably leaves us some vulnerability regarding the legal standard for nexus. Regional modeling and deeper analysis than mixed-use activity centers. They also asked for a narrower definition of what constitutes existing deficiency, because the statute does not have a definition of what an existing deficiency is. So the opportunity, and we have talked about that over the last several times, what is an existing deficiency? And in fact, we came up with a definition that we could put into the statute. My understanding is, why aren't we considering a definition? We're adding a definition of affordable housing, or the recommendation is, but not to add a definition of existing deficiency consistent with our view of what that should be. Is there a reason why that would take an enormous amount of effort to add that definition?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I didn't receive that direction to add a definition for existing deficiency. At this time, an existing deficiency is a roadway that doesn't meet the level of service standards that the commission has adopted. That is how that works in our capital improvements plan. If you'd like a greater definition of that or more defined explanation of that, we can certainly work on that.
So, Madam President and Gary, we actually did come up with a definition for a draft RS to the legislature, and the city did ask back in December to have a narrower definition of existing deficiency. So I'd like us to do that. They requested it, and we've actually done it with the draft RS. I can't quite understand why we can't put that kind of language in our ordinance.
Didn't we have that discussion at the last? I remember, Steve, that we had that discussion and we decided, I'm fine with the way we have it.
Yeah, Madam President, I actually was the one that brought up that concern this last time, and I'm satisfied with the answer we got, that we should take smaller steps instead of a massive step.
That's my recollection. Are we on target there, Mr. Price? Yeah.
Just to express, I think this is a small step to define existing deficiency, a very small step, and not a massive one. One we've already done, and I appreciate Mr. Price coming up with a definition we could work with.
And I think we just agreed at that time to go with the status quo. Is that correct? Commissioner McKinney, do you have any recollection of that?
I think Commissioner Goldthorpe's recollection is about right. I think that's how I recall.
Well, I'll just file a minority report on that then.
Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you. From the last time we met, Austin Miller did meet with our different advisory committees. For the Commercial Developers Advisory Committee, the Bicycle Advisory Committee, the Pedestrian Advisory Group, and the ADA Advisory Committee. There were no specific comments on the proposed changes in the interim update. Several of them had some general questions on the content of the CIP and other methodology things that Austin did answer, but nothing specific to the proposed changes in the draft that was sent out to you. So
that's good to know.
It was a good learning opportunity for all, though. With our Capital Investment Citizens Advisory Committee, they did vote to recommend you do adopt the affordable housing exemption. They were in support of that. They did vote to recommend funding all of the design and construction costs for the projects listed in the capital improvements plan. And they did vote to recommend you approve the draft impact fee ordinance and the CIP update as proposed.
Gary, on the affordable housing section that we have in here, we just had a brief discussion yesterday about no specific guardrails for that. We've got that 20-year duration in there, but as far as, you know, and I know you're familiar with the fact that sometimes people, the affordable housing just applies to 2 or 3 units. You know, zoning can change, and there's just nothing specific to really tie that. So I just felt it was a little ambiguous, and maybe that needed to be tightened up a bit. And certainly be maybe in step with what the cities are doing. And I think Commissioner Pickering indicated that perhaps you thought City of Boise had something that maybe we could.
Madam President, Gary, I think it would be helpful to look into other cities and see what types of pieces of definitions and rules that they have, because it'd be great if we can align with those.
And Madam President,
Best we can with
Pickering, in the
6 cities.
Yeah, in the definition, we basically just listed what the statute states. Back in section 7308, where we have the provisions for the affordable housing exemption, there we listed out, basically it needs to meet the land use agency standard. We put 20 years just because that's the lifespan of the CIP. The few examples we have from the city of Boise, they require that affordable housing restriction on the units that have that for 30 years. We don't have to put a time frame if you don't want to. I guess I need your direction on that if you think you want something different.
Madam
Well,
President.
right now, that's all we've got in there. I just think we need to have a little bit more. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
You're probably right. I believe strongly we need to have some guardrails on that. Otherwise, you know, some unit that we gave an exemption on is bound to be flipped a whole lot sooner than we had anticipated. And so that's my opinion.
Yeah.
And Madam President, Commissioners, that's why we put in the 20 years, that they
Yes.
provide verification to us from the land use jurisdiction that that restriction is in their approvals for a minimum of 20 years, and that the exemption is only for the number of units that are being marketed as affordable housing units, not the entire project, because a lot of times it is only a handful in one building, or maybe it's all but a few that go at market rate. So we have that provision in here. If you think we need to be more specific, we certainly can. We were trying to rely on the land use agency's approval process to place that restriction, so we're not trying to track individual rental units across the county and have they change their marketing, because we have no enforcement authority over that
we
process
can't go down
at
that
all.
rabbit hole. Mm-hmm.
So Madam President, if someone were to, say, flip a project that we had given the exemptions on, what would be the process of recapturing the funds?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, first, I think we would go to the land use agency and ask them how their approval got changed, because to give them the exemption, we would need that verification of how they were going to restrict the unit. So if it was done without their knowledge, then hopefully they would enforce their own restriction. If it was done with their knowledge, then we would have an issue, and we would need to address that with our ordinance and procedures moving forward.
Okay,
And maybe
thanks.
some specificity to that.
Yeah.
You know, that protocol would be helpful to have in there. So we're not just, I don't know, it just concerns me that maybe we need to tighten up some of the guardrails in there. And that would be one.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney?
it strikes me as that question of what the remedies are, that's kind of a legal question, and maybe we would, you know, what happens in such and such a case, that would maybe be something that we ought to ask our general counsel about.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner McKinney, really the only way that you can address that issue is we would require the developer to sign some form of developer agreement or impact fee deferral agreement. And in the event that there is a violation of that standard, then we would have some recourse with the developer as added contraction, and we would record that agreement so it would be against the land.
Okay.
That's really the only way.
Do we currently have agreements of that sort with any developers or any
Well,
situations?
we have impact fee deferral agreements, and we could, nothing specific with, low-income housing, but we could alter that to make that apply.
Okay. What would it take to modify this to allow for that?
Just add a couple of sentences, to be honest with you.
I think that would make sense.
Yeah, I would be in
And
favor of doing that.
we can work on that language. One other point I wanted to bring out, I mean, there's another question that I haven't quite, come to a conclusion on, and that is in terms of the general revenue. So whatever impact fees that would pay, and you would have to supplant that under the code with general revenue. Would that come from all of our sources of income, or would it, that are restricted to building roads, or would it go to our sales tax, the 2.5 million? I haven't really, it's kind of a weird issue because you can argue since it's an impact fee, it relates to transportation and you could use that portion. But at the same time, it's general revenue in support of housing, which is not really within ACHD's jurisdiction. And so, but we can work that out later.
Madam President?
Thank you,
I have a question
Steve.
for Steve. Always.
Oh, don't go. Commissioner Hanson?
So, Steve, I appreciate this being able to go into this ordinance. My observation over the last few years is we oftentimes don't see it, is that when affordable housing projects are proposed to the city of Boise or city of Meridian, and then ACHD then says, well, our policies require X, Y, Z. Sometimes it's to do with access, sometimes it's to do with parking, or there's a variety of things, which then if the city then agrees, we'll just go with ACHD policy, ends up reducing the number of units that happen, so it doesn't pencil out that they're affordable. It seems to me it would make more sense to have an amendment to our policies or other policies to say, if the development has affordable units, that the city, that the any kind of ACHD requirements, which don't relate to housing, we don't do housing, are waived subject to the review of the commission, so that we automatically reduce. In other words, there's a unit, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you've seen this many times. A developer says the city really wants an affordable unit. They come in with, say, 50 units, and they try and figure out how to put it on this property. And they'll say, okay, we're going to make 5 of those affordable. ACHD then says, no, you got to have this, that, and the other for access. They come back and say, the best we can do is 40, 45 units. Sorry, we can't do any affordable. So it seems to me we lose a lot of potential for affordable units. That would be a much more valuable, to me, tool, because we're not trying to borrow from one fund and do to another and trying to pretend like we're doing housing. We simply say there's a process. If there's a development that says it meets a certain criteria for the city's affordable housing, we waive those and subject to the review of the commission. So the staff has to waive them, but they have to come up to us. And then we say, okay, no, we actually don't want affordable units here, or we do want them. Then we can say, no, we're not going to allow this rule. That seems to me, would you work on that? I think that's a much better approach to address the burdens that are placed on affordable housing by transportation-related stuff.
Sure. Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I don't see that as a problem, as including that as a circumstance in which it could be appealed or grounds for a waiver before the commission.
And simultaneous with any consideration of this.
Thank you, Steve. So I think we just have a little bit more to add to this particular section, Gary.
Okay, and Madam President, just to clarify, would you like us to do that before we release it out for public comment or just prior to the public hearing?
No, let's take care of that.
Okay.
Yeah, before, so there's no confusion.
Oops.
You.
Sure. Again, you've seen these numbers before. This is the impact of the recommended changes. The single-family residential fees go up about $700. We skipped ahead a little bit with some of the discussion earlier. So we all know we are talking about affordable housing tools because an exemption is allowed under the statute. So we proposed that language. In talking to the cities and the county, combined, we estimate about 350 units per year is a potential that we could see, which would equate to about $700,000 in exempted impact fees that we would then have to replace out of another revenue source.
Madam President. Gary, can you just elaborate a little bit more about where you got the 350 units per year estimate?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, we spoke with the cities and the county.
And that's just kind of their average, or has it seen an increase over time?
It's, I think, what they are projecting based on their knowledge of what they're seeing this year and what's in the pipeline. 300 of those are in Boise. Obviously, that's the major contributor.
Thank you.
And then finally, Madam President, Commissioners, it was our intention to release the draft for public comment next Monday. Depending on how many comments and what we see, we'd come back with a work session as needed to review those with you and get direction. We'd schedule a public hearing for May 25th. If it's adopted on May 25th, it's an ordinance that does require a supermajority, 4 votes. It would then be published in the middle of June with an effective date of July 1st. That I'd stand for any additional questions that you may have on the draft or the process.
Thank you, Gary. Any other questions or comments?
Madam President, if I may, if we, based on what we've talked about here today, making some additional changes, how's that going to affect our schedule? And maybe let's talk about that for a minute.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I could get you language tomorrow to add a requirement for a development agreement recorded against the property to qualify for the affordable housing exemption.
So then we would need to then approve it for release at our meeting next week, presumably.
Is that, Steve, the things that you're going to be working?
Okay.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Still gives several weeks for
In there.
review and comment.
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me.
Right. So, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam
All
President?
right, Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, Madam President, it sounds like if we can do that, we can put the existing deficiency definition in there as well. And I would move that we withhold releasing it until we get an existing deficiency definition within our ordinance as well.
Well, I think we had the majority, 3 commissioners say that they were fine with the way it is.
So I just want to telegraph that it's not likely I would support this without that. The other is that I think it's not appropriate to raise by 21% the impact fees on residential units. I haven't decided, and it's at this point unlikely that I would support a 3% because of the costs that are being imposed on residences when we get to our budget. And so I don't see, and that you know, this 21% cost in fees imposed on single-family houses is inappropriate, I think, at a time when the cost is just, is out of reach for too many people. So while we'll have some potential remedy for affordable units, there's a lot of people who are in between, and those costs, it's just driving it up. So I just simply can't support a 21% increase in raising fees on single-family residences. So I just want to telegraph that now, and I'm sure we'll get public feedback that there's grave concern about raising fees on residences by 21% as well.
Okay, noted. Any other comments?
Can I ask an additional question though, just for clarification? The increase in the impact fee amount per residence, that's a separate consideration from the affordable housing concept, or is there an offset here? Just help me understand exactly what's going on.
President May, Commissioner McKinney, yes, the increase in the impact fees is completely separate from the affordable housing exemption under consideration. The increase in the impact fees to the various land use types is based on the changes that were proposed in the impact fee eligibility, the project costs, the adding the funding, the design and construction of the projects that were listed as unfunded in the previous CIP. And then there are also pluses and minuses depending on the land use type based on the new ITE trip generation manual. The trip rate for single family housing actually went down, so that helps decrease the impact fee for single family residential. That's why it's 21% increase for single family residential, 27% increase in general for the VMT cost. So
okay.
That's why that's a little bit lower for the single family.
So does our approval of this revised ordinance, that doesn't affect the change in the impact fee number itself? That's, again, they're separate issues, correct?
No,
am I wrong?
President May, Commissioner McKinney, to change the impact fee rate, you have to adopt the new ordinance.
Okay.
And that then codifies the changes that we've discussed. If that's not a desire of the commission, then we would need to look at another option, because I would recommend we should at least implement the new trip generation manual, because that's the newest and best information available, and that's what we state that we use in our ordinance to make sure that we're up to date with the standard of practice for an impact fee ordinance.
Okay.
So, Madam President?
Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, just to clarify, it's kind of the reverse of what we do in our regular budgeting, where we say, this is what we want our tax rate to be, we want to raise, and then we say, these are the projects that we can fund with that tax rate. This is kind of the reverse. We say, these are the ones we want to be unfunded, we want to fund. And so we put those in as part of our CIP, and then we say, as a result, we have to impose impact fees at this rate. So simply by putting more into what we want to pay for, we are saying we're going to raise a fee, because the impact fee statute requires us to tell the people who are paying the impact fees what it's going to go pay for. And so if we had less funded, then we could have a lower rate. But because we are adding more, we were taking things from unfunded to funded, we're going to increase the need to raise the rates, and then the formula tells us what to do as to how much.
Thank you. And Steve, you'll come back with the proposal and options for offsetting the money, about where the money would come from.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Madam President, I just wanted to comment, and Gary alluded to it, and that is that if you don't adopt any of the other changes, the increase in costs from some of the other, and you remember that was the goal, was to try and to get more costs covered by impact fees. The ITE manual and our obligation to have the most up-to-date information as a basis of our fees, that's a constitutional requirement, and we would have to come back to you thereafter with an ordinance that either makes another change, but it would have to adopt the ITE manual.
Steve, can I?
Thank you.
Madam President,
Commissioner
just to clarify, you're not suggesting that constitutionally we have to raise the impact fee?
No.
So the way in which we can bring the impact fee down is to take some of those projects out so that we're not paying for them.
No, all I'm saying is that the whole impact fee program in the law, you don't have clear objective data in formulating it, and a lot of it is based upon assumptions.
Right.
The ITE manual is really the closest we have to objective data, and
The newest.
it's a critical piece in that formula. And if we have an old impact fee and we have a new ITE manual, then we're not meeting that obligation to provide the assumption that's the most up to date.
Right, but we have the ability to say, okay, if we say we don't want to raise fees on residences, we don't want to raise the fees, we have the ability to figure out using the new ITE trip generation manuals, how to reach that level so that we don't keep raising
You can't
fees.
set the level, but you can tinker with
Right.
some things to get it there. We've done that in the past, and that, as Gary explained in the past, that's with the unfunded list, and that's why
Right.
we've done that.
That's right, that's
Right. Very
makes
good.
sense.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Madam President, if,
Mr.
in
Enselman.
case you all are curious, if we did not fund the design and construction costs in the unfunded list, we left the unfunded list intact, the increase to a single-family residence would be 6% in the impact fee. And it'd be 11% in general across the board instead of 27.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Gary. All right, any other questions or comments for Gary? Nope. Gary, thank you very much. Always appreciate when you're up here giving us an update. All right, next item, Traffic Operations Center Conceptual Building Design Update, Sean Martin. This is an exciting one. Let's move forward. Welcome.
Thank you, Sean.
It's a stretch. We have one of those chutes like they do at the bank. Just roll it up and put it in there.
Yes. Okay. So, good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
My name is Sean Martin. I am the Traffic Services Manager here at ACHD, and I am here to give an update on our conceptual building layout for the Traffic Operations Center. All right. There we go. Okay. This wasn't the most current one, but I can go with it. Wanted to begin by thanking you, the Commission, because without your support, we wouldn't have gotten to this point so far. So thank you for the support you have given us in the planning of these facilities, as well as the design of these facilities, and hopefully, eventually, the construction of these facilities. The location of the Franklin Yard is on the north side of Franklin, west of Cloverdale. The parcels together consist of about 10 acres. The back 2 acres of the parcels is our existing drainage pond that we built as part of the Franklin Road project. As you can see, where this project and where this land sits is to the east of Lanark and Touchmark. Touchmark is a signalized intersection, and Lanark is a kind of a backage road collector for Franklin. Plan is eventually to extend Lanark over into our site, and we're going to build a collector road on the western boundary of our parcels that would connect to Lanark. Oh, I thrown away. So to begin with, I want to talk a little bit about the site plans that we have. I could start with the site plan for just the overall area. Yeah, that one. Okay, as I mentioned previously, we are going to be building a collector roadway along the western boundary of the parcels, and that's where we will take access for this site. So we'll have two access points off the collector. The first access point will be primarily for employees, and then the northerly access point will be for deliveries. I mentioned previously that the existing drainage pond is on the back end of the parcel. There's currently a driveway off Franklin Road as an access point to get to the drainage pond. That access point, as well as the pipe that leads to the drainage pond, will be relocated to the new collector roadway. So we will not have this access point or the driveway going back to there. On the southerly part of the parcels is where our traffic operations center or the office building will be. That will be where all the employees are housed, as well as the lab. We have approximately 50 employees that we will be relocating to this new facility. It'll be traffic operations, the TMC, Traffic Management Center, as well as the congestion management group, and our laboratory or lab for our material lab. So this office building is approximately 100 by 250 feet. And then we have a covered warehouse, which is 100 feet by 204 feet. That is where we are going to have all the material that we have in traffic stored. So we're talking traffic signal material, paint material, signs, all that stuff will be stored here. And then we're gonna have a covered shop area, which is we're gonna have various bays for our paint crew and our signal crews that then they can work out of those areas. And then also we will have a pole and mast arm storage area at the back of the area. That's why the deliveries will be coming up here. The big deliveries that we get are our poles and mast arms. The next thing I want to talk about is just the building itself. Let's see. How do I get behind? Let's see. There we go. I want to bring that. There. Oh, that's too much. So when you enter, the building will be on the west side of the building. It'll be a reception area as well as a superintendent's office. We will have a larger conference room located here for the employees, as well as our copy area will be in this area. And then here we have our sign shop. So all these installers will sit here when they are before they go out in the field, an office for the crew chief. And then here is the location where we'll be making all of our signs. Then we have a break room area, as well as an outdoor area off the break room, restrooms and showers and lockers located here. And then from this door back here is where our material lab will be. So we'll have an area for the employees of the lab, and then working space for them to be able to test their materials, both the asphalt and the concrete. Working our way back here is our paint area, our paint office. So we'll have areas for both our permanent employees as well as our temporary employees, our crew chiefs, be able to meet with the crews each morning before they go out and do our striping. Then we'll have a signal office area. Here, this will have our signal maintainers, our signal construction crew, our 2 inspectors, as well as our electronic specialists will all sit in here. And then the main area when you first walk in will also consist of the traffic management center and the congestion management group. So the congestion management group will sit here, and they'll have easy access to the TMC. And here it will be the traffic management center. So the plan is to have 4 consoles and the video wall along this side. And here sits another conference room. It's a smaller conference room than the larger one, but it will also double as what they could like to call a situation room. So if there was ever something happening in Ada County, such as a fire in the foothills, flooding going on, earthquake, you name it, that's something that, big is going on, we could have people in here being able to see into the TMC and be able to see the video wall to see the impacts of what's going on. When not in use, this glass wall can be closed so that we're not disturbing the TMC staff if there's just regular meetings and going on in here. The other advantage of having this room is we do have, well, pre-pandemic, we had lots of tours of the TMC, and hopefully we're going to get back to that. But when we have kids come in, we have a lot of kindergarten kids, first graders, and those, they like to come in and visit TMC. We could have them come into the conference room, and we could have the majority of the tour happen within the conference room outside of the team. So we're not disturbing operations. And then we could bring them into the TMC kind of toward the end of the tour. Next building I just wanted to briefly talk about here. Here's the warehouse. So as I mentioned, this is just going to be the area where we store materials for our signal materials, our signs, our paint materials. Everything will be covered and out of the elements. And then our other building is our shop area. We'll have various bays for our paint crew, our signal crew, and we'll also have a wash bay at the end of the bays. We'll be able to wash our vehicles. And then we'll also have various equipment rooms, be able to store some material here, an area for our shop, welders, and woodworking, those kind of things. So that are the 4. Let me go back. Here. Okay. All right, now, I want to start by saying this is a very rough cost estimate since we are just in the concept stage. This is a cost estimate put together by our consultant, which is CSHQA, along with their sub-consultants. Parametrics is the one who actually did this cost estimate. The site improvements, about $3.7 million. Warehouse building, about $4 million. Shop building, $5 million. And the office building, $8.6 million, totaling $22 million total. Just want to say this is, includes a couple $1 million worth of contingencies. We're trying to be, at this point, since it's very early, we want to be safe on what the estimate is. We will continue to refine this estimate as we continue to go through design, make sure that it is accurate. Also want to make sure that this only includes the buildings and the site material and the site work itself. It does not include anything actually inside the buildings, so any office furniture along that line will be extra. But it does include the TMC and all of the buildings. Next steps. So as I mentioned, we are now wrapping up the conceptual design of the site. After that, we want to enter into a negotiation with CSHQA to do the actual architectural design we'll be bringing forth a separate contract with them to you for approval. And then in June, we want to have a construction management general contractor on board, or CMGC. That is someone who we would hire as ACHT to help us through the process of design and constructing the facility. If everything goes well, we're hoping to complete the design and bid package by January of 23, and then bid the project in February of 23. Did want to say that that schedule is very dependent on the timing of the plan submittals with Boise City. As you probably saw in the articles in the paper with them, they're having a shortage of personnel just like everybody else.
Oh, sure.
And they're not really even giving timelines right now for reviewing of plan submittals. So I would expect at least 6 months or more probably by the time we submit to when we actually might hear back from them. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. A lot of detail. Appreciate it. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Yeah,
Commissioner
Madam
Hanson?
President, John, this is excellent. You're such an expert on all this. Remind me, what news, are we providing new services in the new facility, or are we just improving our ability to provide existing services, expand our ability to provide existing services?
Yes, this office or this complex will just be able to allow us to provide existing services at better, with new facilities and better ways to serve the public from a more centralized location. Our traffic operations group is the one they sit over here with our maintenance group over here. And our congestion management group is in this building. And then our lab is also in the other building on here. But it is not any new services. It's just to provide our existing services from a better location.
And then a follow-up question, probably Christine could answer this, and this is any of this qualify for federal matching funds? I know we do all these services on the state system within the county, but is the state helping to pay for this? Is the feds, or is it all coming out of our general fund? So this is all our general fund.
Everything will be coming from ACHD general fund.
And then my last question is, since it's expansion of our capacity to deliver these services, and obviously free up the facilities we currently operate, have you done a cost-benefit analysis to show how much the taxpayers are going to get from this shift of services from the current configuration to this, so that we can go back and say what they're going to get in return, the cost-benefit analysis of their $22 million?
President May, Commissioner Hanson, we have not done that.
Okay. That'd be good to do as part of the contract for when we hire the consultant or contractor to develop the bid.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Sean, just a couple of quick questions. And Commissioner Hanson's questions alluded to this with regard to what the functions of this new facility. How much capacity do you have for growth? In other words, are these facilities designed with a particular, in the future, we imagine we'll have this demand, and so we're building for that demand. Where does it stand? What capacity do we have?
Yes, President May, Commissioner McKinney, absolutely. We have taken growth into consideration when we're planning these sites. As I mentioned, we're currently planning for about 50 people to existing employees to come out to this location. If you look at this site plan, we have about 81 parking places. So we have identified the areas we're expecting people to go to, whether it be the paint crew, the sign crew. So we have accommodated increased areas, people in those areas where we think we're going to be needing them in the future.
Okay, so it looks like in other words, the current traffic, current employees who are doing these jobs, we've got about 50, and this site is designed for about 80 employees working in these areas as well.
Correct.
Okay. Let me see, let me look at my questions here. And so the $22 million anticipated price tag, is that currently in our budget? Is that currently, do we have all the line items for that in place, or is that anticipating future needs? I don't know if that's a question for you or if we need to ask someone else about that.
Here comes Mr. Daigle.
I'll see what he says before I speak.
Welcome, Paul.
So Commissioners, Paul Daigle, Chief of Staff. Sir, we do have money in the budget for the design.
Okay.
And every year that we have the unspent funds and we put it in some of the reserve, we're going to be using that to pay for it. To your question about cost-benefit analysis, this is the first step in removing ourselves from the Adams facility so we can sell the facility in order to put it back on the tax rolls. So that's all part of the cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, I guess my question was just to quantify it, because it's easy.
Well, if we can sell if we can sell across the street for $40 million, that's the cost-benefit analysis.
Right,
I
and
mean,
Madam President,
that's all
I think
part
we
of it.
can project what the value of that is, so it'd be really, really helpful. One comment, Madam President, if I could, it would have been helpful if we could have the slides attached to the agenda, so we could look at them in advance, so they sort of have, some of these questions came to me just while I'm sitting up here, and I think it'd be helpful if we could have them in advance so that we can formulate our questions and.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. And so then, it sounds like though, what we're doing is some of the operations that are currently happening here across the street in the Adams Yard and other operations that are happening in our traffic management center, those things are going to be consolidated into this new facility.
That is
That's what we're
correct.
talking about. Okay.
That way we can vacate that side of the yard and slowly work our way out of there in that
Okay.
4 to 7.
And the remainder of operations here at Adams, are intended to be moved up to the Federal Way facility when that comes online.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, good. Then just one remaining question for you, Sean. Is the remainder of the site all going to be paved? I'm looking at the access roads and so on. Are we going to have gravel areas or is it going to be essentially all paved?
Commissioner McKinney, President May, we haven't quite got to that level of detail on our
Okay.
planning. I would expect a lot of this to be paved and asphalt, but there definitely will be areas where we can have other material where we aren't expecting maybe as much vehicle traffic.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Sean. It's really gratifying to see these plans move forward. And we've been talking about this for so long, and to have things start to take form. It's good. It's a good message for the public. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, and that was our last presentation. So thanks, everybody.